Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Tech Life with Joanne, and I'm Joanne, and I am bringing you a brand new tech video. First things first, let's pause and mention this. I do have my fan running because it's super hot in my office, and honestly, I need the fan on. So if you can hear it, please forgive me ahead of time. I'll try and speak up so that you can hear me most and not my background noise. All right, so let's just get into this video for Tech Tuesday or Thursday, or honestly whenever I post this video. So for today's topic, I am going to continue talking about what it means to be a web developer and in that web dev space. So another topic that I wanted to bring you was web developer versus web designer. So I wanted to make clear distinctions between the two and what each one means, and the job skills and, the role, all of that goes into what makes up a dev versus a designer. Okay, so let's quickly talk about what it means to be a web designer. A web designer focuses on the visual. It's the look and the feel of the website. A web designer focuses on the UX, the color scheme, the graphics, things like that. Everything that visually makes the website appealing to the user. So the next thing that a web designer focuses on is the layout. It's very important to have a really good layout for your website. Otherwise, honestly, you don't want your website looking basura. You don't want your website looking bad. So having a really good layout for your website is something that the web designer is heavily concerned about. Your web designer will think about where the pages should go, the navigation, what pages need to be there. They'll think about like what goes first, second, third, all of the sections, where you need to place certain buttons, the colors of the buttons, links, the colors of the links, just everything that visually goes into your website, especially the layout and how the user can get from one part of your website to the next is very important to a web designer. So for layout design, they may use tools like InVision or even sometimes Dreamweaver if they are using just the front end and they're just like placing things on the front end of Dreamweaver and then letting that code generate. They may use Dreamweaver. But ultimately what they're doing is that they're using those visual tools to be able to help build out the look and the feel of the website. That is the most important thing to any web designer. So a web designer is also creative focused. Like they are heavily concerned, and I keep using that word because that's the word I can think of. They're heavily concerned about the creativity behind the website. Because you don't want your website to be just boring. You don't want someone to land there and it's just black and white and boring and it just reads like a dictionary. That's not what you want. The web designer is concerned about making sure that your website is very creative. So they'll bring in different things like maybe sliders, making sure that your pictures are seen and making sure the quality of your pictures are good, making sure the quality of the graphics is good. They may, as you scroll, they may have different graphics on the website that are visual aids to your text so that it's not just a bunch of copy. And they'll have like different moving graphics and motion graphics on the website that allows your users to transition from one section into the next. So being creative is something that many web designers have a creative background. A lot of times they will have like an art background. And someone like me, that's how I ended up getting into being a web developer eventually, is that I started out in art. So I have a creative background. So I started in art and then web design and then web development. So that was my transition. And a lot of times that transition is pretty normal. But the web designer is really focused on being creative and is bringing as much light and personality into your website as possible, so that when your users land on the website, it's not just some static, boring website. They want to convey a message. So when your users land on the website, you want them to understand who you are. If you're the owner, if you run a business, you want them to know. I'm sorry, everything wants to go off at once. For some reason in my video, I have all kinds of messages going off, but I'm going to keep chugging through this. But anyway, like I was saying, the web designer is really focused on sending your message across to your users, because that's really important. A user needs to feel your website, and that might seem crazy, like how can they feel a website? But they can. So they need to feel your website. There needs to be some kind of emotion that is coming off of those pages. And that emotion is based on the font that's used, the graphics that's used, the colors that's used, and even when they get down into the copy that's used. What text may need to be bigger and, bold, or maybe, made into a header. What text is subtext. So all of those things goes into the visual creativity of your website, and that's what a web designer is really focused on. They're really focused on making sure that your website is as creative as possible while conveying that message that you, who, if you're the owner of the website, or if they work for a company, the company, whatever message the company is trying to send, the web designer is heavily invested in making sure that that message gets across to your users visually. All right, so let's talk about a web developer. A web developer is focused on functionality. So a web developer is all about the code. Like, they are taking the visual from the design and they are making it happen. So they are 100% focused on code. How does the code work? What needs to be written, making sure that it works well, making sure that it's written well, making sure that it's up to standard, making sure that it's checked across browsers, just pretty much making sure that the website functions. So they are taking the visual and they're actually putting the code behind it to make it all come to life. So web dev focuses on tools like DevTools or Angular or Node or things like that. So different software tools that will actually be the building blocks of making sure that the website runs well. So for all of the nice, pretty graphics or, moving pieces or the sliders, all of those things that the web designer has come up with, now the web dev is actually going to write the code to make all of that stuff function. So they're pretty much responsible for taking all of the pretty and making it happen. So it's not to say that the dev doesn't care about what the website looks like, because yeah, they are. And oftentimes the dev is working very closely with the designer to give them suggestions and things like, okay, if the designer creates some section of the website that looks a certain way, it's the dev's job to make sure that the designer understands what can and cannot be done. Now, that's not to say that anything can't be done, because realistically, when it comes to coding, most things can be done. But it is the dev's job to make sure that all of the pieces of the design fit well together. So let's say, for instance, a designer gives a dev a particular design and there may be a certain layout. Now it's up to the dev to say, okay, well, you know what? This works and this works, but this may not work in this section because of the way that this needs to function. So let's maybe move this below or to the side or somewhere else, so that when it comes to the functionality, it all flows together well. So the designer and the dev work very closely together to make sure that the website not only looks good, but that it also works. Okay, let's get into skill set and code. As a designer, you definitely should have a creative background. You can't design something if you're not good at designing something. So you should have a really good understanding of typography. You should have a good understanding of color schemes, what colors work well together, learning how to contrast when necessary, balance when necessary, all of those things that goes into color theory. You should have a good understanding of that. You should know how to work those particular softwares that allows you to do mock-ups, or any kind of online software that you may use that allows you to do mock-ups for the website. And most web designers do know how to code. So you'll know things like HTML, CSS, and sometimes you might know JavaScript. Okay, so let's get into the dev. The dev definitely needs to know how to code. There is no way around being a dev and not knowing how to code. So as a dev, you want to understand how to code in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and also you want to know a server-side language like PHP. A lot of people don't use PHP, but I'm just going to say PHP because a lot of web designers actually still learn PHP. But you do want to know a programming language like PHP, or let's say a more current one, Python. As a dev, you also want to have a really high understanding of how a website should function. It's really important. Do not skip over that step. You need to understand the functionality of a website, and you need to understand the user intent. So I know that does get a little bit into UX, but I do feel like it is good for a web dev to have UX experience. Because when you have UX experience, you're making the correct coding choices. So the designer is bringing you the visual, but you need to also understand how your user is going to be using your website so that you're making the right coding choices to be able to put in the functionality behind the visuals. So those are the major differences between a web developer and a web designer. And oftentimes, like I said before, these two things collide, they merge, they're one and the same. A lot of times, designers turn into developers because you want to honestly grow your knowledge. You typically don't stay just a designer. You want to learn more code. So oftentimes you turn into a dev. Now, you can find jobs that are just strictly web design, and then you can find jobs that are just strictly web dev. Now, I'll get into a little bit more about front end, back end, all of that on the developer side in another video. But as far as this video is concerned, yes, you can still find those separate jobs. I know a lot of times you might see front end, back end, full stack, things like that, but you can find solely web design jobs where they are just looking for you to creatively create, pretty much. They're looking for you to visually build for their company, to build their website, all of the visuals. So you can still find those jobs out there where it's just strictly web design. And then of course, you can find jobs that is web dev and heavily focused on either one of the three areas, front end, back end, or full stack. So those are the biggest differences between a web dev and a web designer. And I do encourage all of you to try it out. If you're here on this video because you're interested in being a designer or a dev, definitely just dive in. That career is still very heavy in demand. I know a lot of people think that in order to be in tech, you have to be a software engineer or, a data analyst or something like that. But no, being a web designer or a web dev is still in demand. So I do encourage you to get into it. You can either learn it on your own. There's tons of classes online that you can take, or you can actually go to school and do like a short-term program to learn it. You can learn it fairly quickly, as long as you're willing to like study and put in the work. But I do highly recommend that career. I myself have been a web developer for 15 plus years. So I've been in for a very long time. So I can definitely say that it is 100% worth it. Now, the salaries may vary based on your location, like everything really. I mean, based on where you live, the salary may be lower or higher. But generally, as a web designer or web dev, you can make a decent salary. So if you have any questions about being a web designer or a web developer, if you need more clarifications or any questions about tech whatsoever, go ahead and you can drop it in the comment section and I will circle back and I will answer all of your questions. So thank you so much for watching this video. As always, I appreciate every single one of you that tunes into my channel. Definitely, if you are here and you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. Do not wait. Hit that subscribe button and keep up with me because I will be bringing you more tech videos. I do bring my tech videos. I try to be consistent on Tuesdays, even though slight fail recently, but I do bring you my tech videos, and then I bring you my Sunday Life Beyond Tech vlogs where I take you into my life just so you can get a little bit more knowledge about me and get to know me as I get to know you and as we grow together on this channel, just so you can see what I am doing outside of my tech career. All right, if you're even interested in that. But for the most part, go ahead and subscribe for my tech videos because that is the core of my channel, just bringing you more insight into getting into the world of tech, working in tech, and specifically becoming a web developer, because that is where I have the most knowledge since I have been a web developer for so many years now. All right, so thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.